Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable persistence of medieval mysteries. Stories once dismissed as legend, conspiracy, or drunken monk exaggeration, now unraveling under the cold, quiet gaze of modern science. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let's ease into tonight's journey together about the story of jungle justice. The radical jihadists had meticulously planned this event, and now that the moment had come, they were bursting with anticipation. Their bodies exuded energy, each man electrifying the next in the unending wave of its surge. It was not bloodlust, it was righteous fervor revealing their eagerness to set their plan in motion. The long-awaited day had finally arrived, and the men were filled with excitement for the adventure ahead. Anticipation was evident from the grins on their faces and the sparkle in their dark eyes. This thrilling mission ignited a level of excitement they had never experienced before, tapping into something primal they didn't know they possessed. The zeal of soldiers gone before them egged them on to fight the Almighty's war and to wrought his victories with their hands. And why wouldn't they feel exalted? This was not their first time executing an operation of this scale, but something greater was about to go down. Their first large-scale terrorist act was the one they did during Goodluck Ebel Jonathan's administration. The second was towards the end of the first tenure of Muhammadu Buhari. They had done it with the intention of striking a ferocious blow to the heart of the infidels, to steal sleep from their eyes, and to leave them wondering what their lives had come to, and they were about to do it again, bigger and better than the previous ones. History was about to be made, and the radicals felt deeply honored to have this destiny, to walk this path. In a couple of hours, towards midnight, the Boko Haram members would step out. But for now, inside Imam Abdulaziz bin Khalid's spacious compound, some of them gathered in small clusters laughing. Conversations were going on in Hausa and some other native dialects. Others moved around with AK-47s slung over their shoulders, whistling and nodding in apparent satisfaction, and some others seemed to mope about in single-minded focus, barely reacting to their environment. Their minds were clouded with visions of the mission. The Islamic cleric's residence was a blue-gray duplex surrounded by a tall white fence and a massive gold and black gate. The exterior of the duplex was adorned with vibrant phylacactus ornaments and blooming flowers in rich crimson, rose pink, and creamy white. It was one of the most elite compounds in the suburbs of Maiduguri. Abdulaziz bin Khalid served as the official imam of the Nigerian terrorist group known as Boko Haram. He was also the father-in-law of the current leader, Abdullah el-Badawi. The time had come for el-Badawi and bin Khalid to address their followers, and as they emerged from the duplex, the once noisy gathering fell silent, but only for a while, before it erupted into shouts of Allahu Akbar. This further raised the excitement levels as the men gave out ground-shaking cries. The noise level began to die down as the imam raised his hands to signal silence amongst the troops. Those farther from the entrance rushed towards the cleric and his son-in-law, while those closer stood at attention, giving them their full focus. Without a preamble, el-Badawi began giving instructions, and bin Khalid listened, occasionally nodding in approval. The mission was bin Khalid's brainchild, which came as no surprise to el-Badawi, considering his father-in-law's radical nature. "I don't need to emphasize how important today is," el-Badawi stated, stressing the significance of the mission. The goal was to expand their territories under Sharia law, not only in Nigeria, but also across West Africa. They were ready to wage jihad against Christians, those who practiced Judaism, traditional and idol worshippers, and apostate Muslims who aligned with the perceived infidels. El-Badawi's voice was filled with palpable emotions as he continued admonishing the jihadists. The crowd was mesmerized. No one dared to disrupt the sanctity of the moment. After a brief pause to catch his breath, El-Badawi scanned the faces before him, then resumed speaking. Today marks a turning point. Tonight, in the name of Allah, most merciful, most beneficent, we will thrust our cause to the forefront of this country. We shall instill terror, not only in the hearts of Nigerians, but also in the hearts of her neighbors and the world. Take note, this is just the beginning. When we are done, what ISIS and Al-Qaeda do will be child's play compared to what we shall achieve in this country. El-Badawi spoke with the conviction of a prophet who had glimpsed the future. When we are finished, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic Brotherhood, Hezbollah, Hamas, and our fellow jihadist brothers will align themselves with us. That's why today's mission is as important as it is deadly. But fear not, O great servants and warriors of Allah, for He is with us. If He has given us the go-ahead, then we must proceed. We must be prepared to become martyrs for Allah when the need arises. Indeed, dying for Allah should be our highest aspiration. Inshallah, the crowd replied for the first time since the speech began. Today, we send you forth to honor your God. You must not fail. We will do what is necessary in this country to bring glory to Allah. With El-Badawi's speech concluded, one of the members tasked with leading the operation shouted, Allahu Akbar, at the top of his lungs, fist raised in the air. His fellow jihadists echoed the chant with equal fervor. As the crescendo died down, El-Badawi issued a final charge before bin Khalid took over, leading them in prayers. The cleric and the radicals knelt, facing Mecca, as they sought Allah's guidance and success for their mission. Once the prayers were complete, the crowd dispersed like mice to attend to last-minute preparations before boarding their vehicles, while those who didn't have anything to do again went straight to their trucks. El-Badawi observed as his men scattered, feeling a surge of excitement as he locked eyes with his father-in-law. Both men smiled, knowing that the success of this operation would elevate them and Boko Haram to the global stage. After today, their name would instill fear in the hearts of many, both in Nigeria and beyond. I am proud of you, my son, bin Khalid said, a rare display of approval. El-Badawi was taken aback by his father-in-law's praise. From a man usually filled with criticism, this acknowledgement meant a lot. He had never heard his father-in-law express pride in anyone, not even his own children. Although it wasn't the warmth he desired, he accepted it for what it was. Thank you, father, El-Badawi replied, suppressing the mix of excitement within him. But do not forget that this was your brainchild. I can never take the glory for myself. El-Badawi tried to sound humble and polite, even though he was inwardly feeling the exact opposite. Too, of course it was my brainchild, bin Khalid said smugly, clearly welcoming the acknowledgement. You do not have the wisdom and the brain to come up with something as brilliant as this. But each time I gave you wonderful and most excellent ideas, you always executed it with passion, just as you're doing today. El-Badawi's excitement turned into anger and disdain for his father-in-law at his last remark, but as usual he bottled it. He knew his place. To the world, El-Badawi might be seen as the leader of this group, but Imam bin Khalid was the real deal, controlling the stage from behind the scene. El-Badawi was just the on-screen guy. Thank you, father. This time around, he said with a much lesser quantity of excitement, but it was enough for his father-in-law not to notice that anything was awry. Bin Khalid welcomed the appreciation before turning back toward the house. But just as he was about to step inside, El-Badawi spoke up again. "Aren't you forgetting something, father?" he asked as bin Khalid's back faced him. Without asking what he meant, bin Khalid turned back around, smiling knowingly. He retrieved his phone from under his jalabiya and dialed a particular number from memory. It rang once, twice, and on the fourth ring the call was answered. Placing the phone to his ear, the cleric uttered the next sentence. "Hello, Mr. President." He had just called the President of Nigeria. The President would pass instructions down the chain of command, ultimately leading to the commander of the army base where the operation was to take place, ordering him to stand down. It was 5 minutes before midnight, and most of the students in this all-girls secondary school were well done with their activities for the day, with the last activity being to study at the school library. All the senior prefects had gone around each hostel 55 minutes ago, checking and ensuring that all the boarders were in their pajamas instead of casual wear. The students, including the ones that had slept and the ones that still had a long night, had complied. It was part of the school rules and regulations, and there was a steep strike for anyone that rebelled. Now that it was almost 12 midnight, the prefects were done with the activities that were required of them by the school and joined the others. Some of the students were already sleeping. Almost half of those who were already sleeping snored away like a bad engine motor car. Around each hostel, a few lights were still turned on by the late-night and all-night readers. A few students, the majority of them being senior students, stayed awake, not actually reading but whispering and trading gossip. Then all of a sudden there was an abrupt silence. There was an eerie silence, as though something dark and ominous had just appeared. Even the shuffling paper sounds from the readers as they flipped several pages stopped, having been replaced by entirely unfamiliar ones. Then came the loud boom. All the students who were sleeping joined the ones who were already awake, in a state of heightened alertness. The teenage girls gathered closely, as if seeking solace in each other's presence, as the tension outside their hostel intensified. Their body language betrayed their confusion and fear, mirroring the unfolding events beyond the interior walls. The students whose sleep was interrupted began throwing a barrage of questions to the ones who had been awake, hoping they could get an explanation of what was happening, but nothing was coming forth. Nobody was making sense, although some of the students were already coming up with dangerous theories. After the deafening boom subsided, there was a loud crackling of guns that, not surprisingly, was familiar to the girls. Not just them, but everyone living in the northern part of Nigeria was familiar with that sound as well. AK-47, no doubt about that. Unable to remain still in confusion, some of the students who were brave enough or stupid enough slowly crept towards the window on their hands and knees, raised up their heads, and began to peep through the window to see exactly what was happening for themselves, as the other students simultaneously started ducking under their bunk beds to avoid being hit by a stray bullet. What the students who were brave enough to inquire saw sent terror into their young hearts. The students could see the muzzle flashes from not less than 3 AK-47s. Beyond all reasonable doubt, they knew who were doing the shooting. It was none other but the Nightmare of the North, the entire Nigeria and her neighboring countries. The #1 terrorist group in Nigeria, and one of the top Islamic terrorist groups in the world that branded itself as Jama'atu al-Sunnah for Lidawati wal Jihad, JASDJ, which invariably translated to Group of the Sunni People for the Calling, and Jihad, popularly known as Boko Haram, and recently tagged the Nigerian Taliban. The terrorists had lined up the school's security personnel and were shooting each of them at the back of the head, execution style. A mounted tripod was facing the security officials that were being gunned down to be uploaded on YouTube and broadcasted to the world later. The students' blood ran cold as they remained frozen in their spots. What they feared the most had just befallen them. Somehow their school had just appeared in the Boko Haram radar, and just like a shark follows the trail of blood to its victims, that's how the terrorists had come for them. For the first time, the students felt and understood real terror as they began to imagine all sorts of negative scenarios and what the jihadists would do to them when, or if they eventually got captured by the radicals. No, the students would not allow themselves to be captured, at least not without a fight. The once brave but now terror-filled students immediately snapped to action as they joined the other students who had been cowering under their bunk beds and behind their cupboards. The students were a mixture of the two major religions in the country, with 80% of the students being Christians. Thus, since this horror show began, some of the students who were able started praying in their own beliefs. Some were violently quaking, unable to mumble coherent words. The rest had already gone into hysteria. All these reactions from the girls were glaring proof that they were not prepared for what was about to happen that night. The gunfire ceased, and the students didn't need any soothsayer to tell them that their security personnel were all lying dead in the pool of their own blood. Just as expected, the students began hearing the voice of a man speaking in Hausa language via a PA system, instructing all the students to come out of their hostel. His tone of voice was menacing as he gave the final blow by telling them that they had been surrounded and there was no escape for them. None of the students did as instructed. Instead, they shut their eyes tightly, covered their ears with their hands, crawled into a ball, and shrunk deeper and deeper under their bunk beds, desperate and frantically hopping for a rescue, willing the jihadists to go away, willing that they should just disappear or anything, just anything, but to end up in the hands of these terrorists before the night was over. When the students were not pouring out of their hostel doors, as instructed after a 60-second countdown, the terrorists began breaking down the doors and window glasses, and the students began screaming simultaneously. But no one would come to their rescue as the terrorists succeeded in breaking in and started rounding up the students. Some of the students were overwhelmed with fear and horror upon seeing the hooded men who were dressed in all black, and as a result, they fainted. The evil that was swarming around these terrorists was palpable. The terrorists succeeded in getting the ones who were able to walk together and marched them off to one of their trucks, where they were packed together like sardines in a can. The rest of the terrorists hefted the students who had fainted on their shoulders in a fireman's carry and dropped them in a different truck. At this point, many of the students were crying at the top of their voices, screaming for help, and equally begging the terrorists to let go of them. But the terrorists did not listen. It wasn't part of their plan to let go of any of the students, nor was it what they bargained for. They didn't come here to carry out a show of power on a bunch of teenage girls and just walk away. No, they came for the real thing. After all the students had been successfully tucked away in their trucks, the drivers climbed the front seats and revved their engines. Obviously, it was time to go, but the leader who was in charge of this operation did not want to go just yet. He wanted to carry out one last act of defiance. Thus, he took out 3 rocket-propelled grenade launchers and distributed them between himself and 2 other guys and ordered them to start loading the RPGs. I go first, and on my count you follow. After today, no one would ever be able to study here again. The men shouted praises to Allah as the leader, and the other two guys hefted the launcher on their shoulders. One after the other, the men pressed the triggers of the grenade launchers. What followed next was a bright light. The terrorists cheered as the contrails of the RPGs sliced through the air and scored a direct hit on their targets. All around that area, there was a burning wreckage where the school buildings and hostels stood 1 minute ago. Indeed, no one would be studying there anytime soon. To the terrorists, that was a very big win, but it was the exact opposite for the Nigerian educational sector. Mission completed, all the terrorists climbed into their trucks as their drivers sped off with them and their prizes. The terrorists went away, believing that no one had seen them. All the soldiers in and around that community had obeyed the instruction from above to stand down. All the potential witnesses were shot at the back of the head. Thus, apparently no one had seen what they did. But no, someone saw them. Captain Hassan Lode was a well-known and revered sniper soldier with the Nigerian army. Hailing from an Islamic and polygamous background, he was the 10th child of 16 children, his mother the third of 4 wives. Currently at the age of 33, he had spent 14 years with the Nigerian army, having been recruited at the age of 18. Hassan had succeeded in fulfilling his childhood dream, which was to join the military with the primary purpose of eradicating terrorism and any other form of insurgency that would want to destroy the sovereignty of his beloved nation. During his recruitment process, he'd believed that he was doing the right thing. The Nigerian army were the good guys, and he was happy to be part of them. But little did he know that things were not quite as they seemed. The past 18 years had unveiled a lot of horrible mysteries that could only be known by an insider. The kind of mystery that he could never tell any outsider, not even his lovely wife of 15 years, to avoid being court-martialed. Indeed, his perception wasn't all wrong. Majority of his counterparts were truly good guys who had also joined the Nigerian army because of honest purposes, but just like with every 12, there were several Judases among them, and some of these Judases came in the form of their superiors, including the current president of the country. But Captain Hassan Lode wasn't a traitor to his country, and thus, when the order came for him and his colleagues to stand down, the good captain did not. After he finished his daytime patrol in this northern region that had been riddled with terrorism and insecurity, and handed over to those who were on night duty, he sprinted with the speed of a cheetah out of his barracks and began making his way to his home, where he rushed up to his army-trained hound dog, unchained him, and with a few instructions, he and the hound dog took off, leaving his wife's confused questions that she had thrown at him upon seeing him unanswered. Because he didn't have the coordinates of the exact location the terrorist attack would be taking place, that was why his hound dog, whom he'd named Warrior, was following him so that he could help detect any such activities. And the hound dog did. After a long time of darting around the community searching, all of a sudden, the hound dog started reacting uncomfortably as he furiously waggled his tail, tugged on his leash, and began barking up a storm. Still holding the leash in a tight grip, Hassan took off to the direction his hound dog was leading him, desperately praying to beat the terrorists to the punch and rescue the girls. He didn't make it. Much to his utter dismay, he realized that the problem was already underway. He had come too late. Hassan could see the terrorists shooting the security officials at the back of the head after commanding them to kneel down. He turned around, bent over, and began to vomit at the side of the bush. The faithful dog, upon seeing what was happening to his master, resumed barking, but the hullabaloo was drowned out by the sound from the gunshots as they blasted off the brains of their victims. The army captain immediately reached out and gave the dog a scratch on his ears, a sign that he was all right and also to calm the dog. Warrior stopped barking and sat down peacefully at his master's feet. 7. When he had finished hurling off all the contents in his stomach into the bush. Hassan realized that he'd just created another problem for himself. He had no water to rinse his mouth. His gaze moved around searching for water. That was a pitiful attempt. The only place he would find water would be inside the school, close to the hostels, but it had been inundated by the jihadists. He tried as much as he could to wipe his mouth with his handkerchief, making a mental note of washing it immediately when he got back home. When he finished, his gaze darted about again, but this time around, for a different purpose. As soon as he saw what he was looking for, he directed his dog as they began moving towards the direction. He'd spotted a nearby plateau. It would give him a clear view of what was happening in the school and also keep him away from the evil eyes of the terrorists. Hassan and the hound settled down at a sitting position at the top of the plateau. There, they watched helplessly as the terrorists extracted the teenagers from their boarding house into their trucks. His mind was scrambling with different ideas and scenarios of how he could engage these guys in a firefight without some of the girls dropping as casualties. But all the scenarios he came up with showed him that it would be almost impossible. Sure, he had his sniper rifle, a bolt-action Alex 338 Les Bayer. Worst-case scenario, the jihadists might even start shooting and killing the girls so that they won't be rescued. He couldn't let that happen. A voice in his head argued back that death would be a better fate to what was about to befall these girls. No, he should engage these radicals now. But before he could finish locking and loading, the terrorists had finished decimating the school compound and hostels, and were currently on the move as the distance between them and the burning wreckage they left behind grew wider. Hassan watched in dismay as the rear lights of the terrorists' trucks got to the end of the school road and began to turn, one after the other, and disappeared from his view. He had failed. His initial plan was to get to the schoolgirls and save them before the terrorists did. He'd planned to not just save them from the terrorists, but to get them to a safe place out of the reach of the terrorists. He knew he risked being court-martialed for disobeying a direct order from above. That was why he had wanted to carry out the mission out on his own, with his hound dog as his only company. That was why he didn't want to get anyone involved, and that was why he intentionally rushed out of his house with his dog, avoiding his wife's confused questions. But now, he wished he'd taken a different tact. He wished he'd engaged the terrorists in a firefight, not minding the outcome of the impact it would have on him and his career as a military officer. Hassan cursed in frustration. Blast it all. Blast all the stupid hesitations and second-guessing. Blast it all. His frustration was now mixed with a new feeling, anger. It was an appealing Molotov cocktail, and he swallowed it whole. Hassan was a devout Muslim, but he utterly and vehemently detested the terror the Boko Haram were unleashing on Nigeria and her neighboring countries in the name of his religion. Indeed, he denounced them and all that they stood for, and he wasn't the only Nigerian Muslim with this hate sentiment. For such people, terrorism as a means to force people into their religion was an anathema. For a while, Hassan was silent as he remained seated at the top of the plateau with his hound dog, but his imagination was running wild with several terrible things the terrorists could do to the girls. The torture, sexual and physical abuse, the sex trafficking, and oh no, all the scenarios his imagination showed him agitated him all the more. It enraged the emotional storm that was already brewing within him. Resentment, vengeance, and several other overwhelming emotions he couldn't put to words at that moment sprung up like a busted dam and quadrupled. And right there and then, Hassan swore to make Boko Haram his personal enemies. This was no longer just about the Nigerian army and Boko Haram. The game has just changed significantly for Hassan. It was now personal. And he would not bother quenching the raging flame inside him. If anything, he would fan it until it either consumed him or the Boko Haram. If only he knew what was coming. Hassan got up abruptly with such great force that made his highly trained hound dog jump. He spun around and began to make his way down from the plateau, and without a word or command, his dog followed close behind on his heels. Hassan went to where the security officials of the school were all lying dead in the pool of their blood. Up close, the gory scene looked even more horrendous. He thought of burying the dead security officials, but quickly decided against it. It wasn't his place to carry out such rites. Plus, it was better to leave them there so that they would be easily found by the people who would alert their family members about what had become of them. That is, if they weren't found first by their family members. And with those gory images of the school's security personnel chiseling itself in his imagination, he spun around, jerked his dog's leash so hard it almost hurt. The dog obediently followed, and the night swallowed them both. As the day broke, it did so with the terrible news of the missing Chibok girls. It was barely 7 in the morning, but several media outlets were having a field day with the latest highly repulsive report from the north about the missing girls. The media news report could no longer suffice, as those who had already heard the news began informing others. Word of mouth was really proving to be one of the most effective tools, as it made the news fly faster like wildfire. As the news continued to cut across the streets, bus stations, companies and enterprises, schools, market and other social places, the people began to hastily abandon what they were doing and scamper to the nearest television so as to not just hear the news, but also to see the images as it was being displayed on the television screen with their eyes. Most of the people who did not have televisions around began browsing the internet with their mobile devices and computers, while the rest went to the nearest newspaper stands. It didn't take long for a lot of international media to be in the loop about the nightmare unfolding in Nigeria. In short, some of the international media outlets were giving the breaking news at the same time as the local media. These were the ones whose correspondents were fortunately in the country at the time, the ones who used their satellite drone, and the ones who connected to a live feed from local affiliate media outlets in the country. There was a brewing uproar in the country in reaction to the news that was coming from the local media, which ended up being extended to the global stage by the international media. Though the reactions that were pouring in nationwide and all over the world were obnoxious, it was nothing compared to what was happening to the family of the affected students and the deceased security officials who had plunged into a state of trauma, shock, despair, and a lot more of these variations. Some of the fathers, mothers, or both parents of the students were panting out of shock, developing heart attacks and cardiac arrest, and outrightly dropping dead. The thought of their children in the hands of terrorists was apparently too much for them to bear. All thanks to the media, the masses were receiving updates about the families of the victims. This, on its own, sent a fresh tumult of agitation from the masses. It was indeed a horrible day in Nigeria, and the people, including those not in the same affected regions, were deeply moved by the event that took place in the early hours of that day. Except for a few heartless ones, the terrorist attack on the Chibok girls felt personal to a lot of Nigerians, as though it was their loved ones who were victimized. The Nigerian president, as usual, was slow in his response as regards the unfolding nightmare. The Nigerian army also wasn't putting out any statement at the moment as to why the last terrorist acts and several others would continue unabated under their noses. The events that will take place in the next few days would expose a lot about Nigeria and its government. But it wouldn't be the end, as most Nigerians would be hopping. Instead, this would be the prelude to more horrifying events. The president of Nigeria, Ahmad Mustafa, sat down on his leather couch in his living room, which was situated at the presidential quarters, chain-smoking at this time of the day, as he watched what was unfolding on the news with other Nigerians. Unlike the masses, the news wasn't shocking to Mustafa. Indeed, this was an operation he personally authorized, and the sheer joy of watching his handiwork on television with the masses was something he couldn't explain or put appropriate words to right now. As the president of the country, he had already been called and informed personally about the terrorist attack. Even at this moment, he knew that the file containing every detail about the attack would be waiting for him on his office table. The file would be there, alongside every other detail and happenings in the country that he needed to be privy to as the president of the country. He knew that his security advisors and the citizens would be expecting him to be in his office by now, going through the files with a look of horror on his face. He knew that they would be expecting him to be preparing to give his speech, but no, Mustafa would not be rushed. He was, after all, still the president and their commander-in-chief, so they didn't have the right to rush him, and because of this, Mustafa would take his sweet time. As he continued to watch the television, there was something electrifying, exhilarating even, about the display of hopelessness and despair that was coming out from the masses. Such reactions were intoxicating, and it was that kind of feeling that Mustafa would want to get over and over again. Unable to keep his excitement to himself alone, the president picked up one of his secured phones and dialed the direct number of Imam bin Khalid, the cleric of the Boko Haram terrorist group. Bin Khalid picked up the call just before it would go unanswered. "Are you watching the mayhem that is currently going on in the country?" he asked, his voice barely concealing his excitement. "Good morning to you too," Bin Khalid quipped. Apparently everyone was in high spirits today. Okay, maybe not everyone, just the bad guys. Of course I am. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. The president and Bin Khalid laughed out loud simultaneously. "This is so wonderful, Mr. President. Once again, my men have pulled through. Such a commendable job by your men, I must say." "That's right, Mr. President. My men and I have been celebrating all night long. I just wish I was there with all of you as you celebrate." "We wish so too. You have really played a huge role in the success of what we do in this country by making it easier for us. But we know you can't join us now because you need to perform the so-called civil duty to pacify all the infidel dogs of this country, but don't worry, I will send you a bottle of our red wine via our usual carrier. I very much appreciate that. It would be a wonderful addition to the fine collections in my wine bar." Mustafa replied with a contented smile. "Before I go, I wanted to ask if you've read the speech that I am planning to present today." "Oh yes, you mean the one you prepared in reaction to last night's Operation 11. Before Mustafa could get the chance to reply, Bin Khalid continued. "I read it as soon as one of my stooges brought it to me. Not bad, Mr. President, not bad. Have you also read mine?" "Yes, I have, and I must say, you really do know how to stick it to them." "Allahu Akbar," Bin Khaled shouted, laughing. Mustafa replied in kind. The line went dead. Mustafa got up from his couch, and with the heavy scent of cigarettes trailing behind him, he made for his office. One of his aides entered just after he left and cleared the ashtray that was overflowing with cigarette butts. Chibok, Borno State, Nigeria. After all he saw last night, Hassan could not sleep all through the night, having been haunted by all he'd seen and heard. With a moan, he kept tossing and turning beside his wife in his bed. As soon as he returned from his failed mission, he'd forced himself, against his will, to go straight to bed after washing himself from the smoke and soot, hoping to catch some sleep before waking up early for work. Another reason he went to bed was because his wife was going to ask him about it if she noticed that he didn't sleep beside her. But all these eventually became a fertile effort as his constant moaning and thrashing woke his wife, who hurriedly held him in her arms all through the night as she consoled and inquired the reason for his distress. But he couldn't tell her. How was he supposed to do that? How was he going to tell her that the same government that was supposed to protect them was now killing them? During the last campaign, Hassan could not vote, not just because he and his fellow military counterparts had been saddled with the responsibility to maintain law and order during the election time, but because of his military status. He had never been able to vote for his preferred candidate during election periods, but his wife, Nafasa, who was a civilian, could vote, and she had voted for Mustafa. She'd liked Mustafa. She had believed every lie that came out of his mouth in the form of campaign promises, and she and her little group of friends had even campaigned for him, believing that he was just the right person for the presidency, the anointed one. Although he wasn't saying anything, his wife and a lot of Nigerian citizens had been seeing what was happening. They had been seeing all the opposite of what President Mustafa promised prior to being elected into his current office as the president of the country. But he wondered how she would feel if he told her that it was much worse than whatever she was seeing now. He had often seen the look of regret on her face, and that was why he had resolved not to discuss sensitive matters of this high magnitude like what happened last night with her, because he knew it would make her feel more guilty, and the last thing he wanted to do was to make his wife unhappy. The hardship in the country was already doing its fair share to his wife and other citizens in the country. There was no need for more. "You are shivering. Let me get you a cup of tea to see if it can warm you up a little," Hassan's wife, Nafasa, said, cutting into his thoughts. Unable to get out any coherent words, he just nodded. Knowing Hassan all too well as someone who loved watching the morning news whenever he could before going to work, she turned on the television to keep him occupied with something. "I will soon be back," Nafasa said as she covered him with a thick blanket, patted his back affectionately, looked at him with concern, and left the bedroom. After his wife left the room, Hassan's gaze was riveted to the television screen as it displayed the horrific sight where the terrorist attack had taken place last night. The scene was no longer as gruesome as it was last night. Somebody must have gone through great lengths to cover up certain things. As he continued to watch, he heard the anchor, a lady of average height who was in her mid-30s, announcing that the president would be giving his remark on the latest happenings at the top of the hour. Hassan could not wait to hear what the president had to say, and he knew it would be the same for most, if not all, the faithful citizens of Nigeria. He wondered if the president would say something different for a change, even though he was having his doubts. ASO Villa, Abuja, Nigeria. With a phalanx of security accompanying him, Mustafa entered the press conference room that was only used by the president and the members of his cabinet when they wanted to address the nation, after the media crew had finished setting up the place. He'd also applied some makeup to his face. Thus, he was ready when the media crew were good to go. He took his place behind the teleprompter as the national anthem began playing, and his face began to appear on the several TV monitors that were strategically hung on the wall of the conference room. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey. When the national anthem was recited, President Mustafa started speaking slowly. Fellow Nigerians, today, a tragedy of immense proportions rocked our nation, though the affected were only the people of the little town of Chibok in Borno State. The ripple of shock has spread across the entire country as we watched in utter horror the extent of evil some men's hearts have conceived and perpetrated on the innocent members of that community. Mustafa stopped for a while, adjusted his eyeglass that was almost sliding down his nose, and continued. I want to begin by officially confirming the kidnapping of 276 students, all girls, from the government girls' secondary school. This incident is believed to have occurred at midnight, precisely 12:15 to 12:45 a.m. This act of terror was carried out by the proscribed Boko Haram sect, whose involvement was confirmed by military intelligence gathered after the action. Chibok, Borno State, Nigeria. Hassan had been listening to the president's speech while simultaneously wondering if the man even had a conscience at all. He wondered how the man could sleep at night, and how he could boldly lie to over 200 million Nigerians as he was doing right now without feeling a pang of guilt. Unable to continue lying on his side, Hassan sat upright and continued to listen to the so-called president's speech. Gone was the sickness and nausea, having been replaced by disdain for the president. My deep regrets and sincere apologies goes to the families, friends, and well-wishers of the abducted girls, and I assure them of the full concern and support of the nation in these perilous times. As the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, I will spare no resources. This act will not go without a proper and high-priority investigation. This government will not rest. We will not give sleep to our eyes until we bring back our girls, and this barbaric sect is completely wiped out of our beloved nation, though some are considered to be freedom fighters seeking religious liberation. Hassan was visibly shocked. What was the meaning of his last sentence? He had just used the guise of rendering a speech to the nation and pledged his allegiance to Boko Haram. Hassan hoped that every Nigerian who was currently listening to the ongoing remark was not too busy to get the message of his last statement. No, Nigerians were brilliant, and he knew they got everything verbatim. If they didn't get it, the media would definitely show them. Further information will be released to the public about the committee that will be instituted to carry out investigations of this kidnap. The president continued after a brief pause. Finally, I admonish that this is a time that we all should put our hands together. We should not become divisive and play sectarian politics. I mean, we should not politicize the tragedy for personal or party gains. The war against terror can only be won together. I cannot end this speech without again extending my heartfelt consolation to the affected families. We will not let your daughters rot in captivity, although you defied the commands of the sect by giving them Western education. All the wind was knocked out of Hassan at that last statement, but Mustafa continued, as though he had not just thrown a bombshell on everyone who was currently listening to him. But that topic is not up for debate right now. Let me reiterate my pledge to bring back our girls as soon as possible. Fellow Nigerians, I can assure you that you shall be apprised of every unclassified detail of the extreme measures that we are taking to facilitate the return of our girls. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The national anthem started again as the president and his phalanx of security walked out of the conference room without answering any of the many questions that were hurled at him by the press corps. The president unceremoniously walked into his office, but before he could sit down, one of his secretaries began calling out to him. "Yes, what is it?" He snapped at the secretary with an impatience that wasn't unfamiliar to his members of staff as he simultaneously spun around and was now face to face with his secretary. The secretary was the first to look away. "The Chief of Army Staff is on the line. He says he wants to speak with you," the secretary said, handing over the phone with an outstretched arm to Mustafa. Mustafa snatched up the phone from the man and ordered everyone to leave his office. Only until everywhere was cleared was he able to take the call. He exchanged a few words of greeting with the caller. Then, the Chief of Army Staff decided to go straight to why he was calling Mustafa. "Mr. President, I just received information that I believe you might be interested to know. It is about last night's operation." "What about it?" "You know I don't like taking sensitive calls of such magnitude via my official phone," he said, finally plopping down heavily on his seat, but not without scanning his office one more time for unwanted intruders. The office was a grand space adorned with rich Nigerian cultural artifacts and elegant furniture. Mahogany desks were complemented by traditional Nigerian art, symbolizing the nation's diverse heritage. The Nigerian national flag stood proudly in a corner, and the room exuded an air of authority, combining modern functionality with a nod to the country's history and culture. The president's seal and the Nigerian coat of arms were prominently displayed on the wall behind the president decks, reinforcing the official nature of the space. The room was well lit, creating an atmosphere befitting the leader of Africa's most populous nation. Assured that he was alone in his office, the president exhaled and ordered the Chief of Army Staff to speak. "I believe someone went against the orders you asked me to give my men last night." "How come? What happened?" Mustafa asked astonishingly, sitting up in his seat. "I did everything you told me. I ordered my men to stand down, but it didn't suffice because I wanted to make sure that my orders would be followed to the letter. So I called some of them who are loyal to me to become my surveillance team. I asked them to do it discreetly, of course. I wasn't expecting them to come back with negative results. As a security officer, I just had to play it safe, but I couldn't believe my ears when they reported back to me this morning." When the Chief of Army Staff, Jamal Rashidi, finished talking, there was a long silence, so long that the Chief of Army Staff wondered if the line had been disconnected. "Hello, are you still there, Mr. President?" "I'm still here, Rashidi." Silence. Then Mustafa started speaking. "I'm just wondering who could be foolish enough to go against an instruction coming from a high authority, or who could be brave enough to defile the order that goes against his conscience." Rashidi thought, but didn't say anything. 15 I can't believe this," the president muttered with a hint of bemusement, and something else Rashidi couldn't decipher at that moment. Another pause. But now, without warning, the bemusement completely transcended into anger. "Who is this fool that dared to go against instructions?" asked Mustafa through gritted teeth. The Chief of Army Staff began to reply, but the president cut him off with another question. Was he not afraid of being caught and killed by Boko Haram? Was he not afraid of being court-martialed? To your last two questions, I'd say apparently not. I mean, he knows the drill. He has been with the army for over a decade. It is obvious that in this case, he is not considering the repercussions of his actions, and that's more of the reason why I said I should get you apprised of this. Unless what, Mr. President? Unless he has an ulterior motive, or he has cover from a foreign enemy government, the latter is most likely. The President and the Army Chief of Staff were quiet for a long time, each of them swallowed by their own thoughts. After a couple minutes more, the President spoke up. Hope you realize that this changes everything. Yes, Mr. President. You realize that this changes everything significantly? The President asked in a more serious, menacing tone of voice. I do, and that's why I'm calling to ask what you think we should do about him. We can't afford for this guy to go to the media or our enemies and tell them what he knows. But do you have anything in mind that you can do to him? Asked the President. Yes, you just have to say the word and we will take care of the rest. We can make him drop off the radar and make his history disappear. President Mustafa contemplated for a while and finally decided. Hello, sir, are you still there? The question from the Chief of Army Staff made him realize that he had taken longer than he should. Of course, I was contemplating what you just told me. So, have you decided? President Mustafa replied to the Chief of Army Staff with a question of his own. Do you have the details of the soldier who has blatantly committed this atrocity? Blatantly? Yes, atrocity. Rashidi wasn't so sure about that, but he however gave Mustafa the answer to his question. Yes, I have all his details here on my table. Read it out to me now. Yes, Mr. President. His name is Hassan Lawal, a captain and a sniper in the Nigerian army. Islam is his religious affiliation. He was recruited at the age of 18, currently in his early 30s. He has spent 14 years with the Nigerian army. He is married to only one wife whose name is Nefisa for 15 years, but no children because of her medical condition. At that point, the President jumped in. So why is he still married to only one wife when she didn't give him a child? The report I have here shows that the couple dote on each other, and his wife's name frequently on his lips attests to the fact that he loves her plenty, if I might add. That's why he won't get married to another woman. So he's a Muslim and a fool. 16, a Muslim? Yes, a fool. Again, Rashidi wasn't so sure, but he had to continue his duty. Well, I guess that's the right way to put it. Do you think he secretly has a child with any woman outside his marriage? None that I know of, Mr. President. President Mustafa muttered. Fool Muslim. What? I didn't get that, Mr. President. Never mind, I wasn't actually talking to you. So you are certain that the evidence you have gathered against this your man is conclusive? Absolutely, I can bet my salary on it. As a matter of fact, if dogs could speak in the language that you and I can understand, that's what his hound dog would say, because he went with his master. Mustafa didn't have any reason to doubt his Chief of Army Staff. This person is now an apostate Muslim, a betrayer of the cause. Hope you realize that, the President asked, emphasizing every word. Well, you're correct. From the way the Chief of Army Staff answered, the President could detect a hint of doubt, or was it something else? Either way, his tone wasn't as convincing as Mustafa expected it to be. He just hoped the Chief of Army Staff would not also go rogue on him. That would be hellish, but at the moment, Rashidi was requesting for his permission to kill someone who had not followed orders. That was a good sign, he surmised. What do you want us to do? My men are on standby, asked Rashidi. You have done a good job by keeping an eye on him. Don't kill him yet. Let's wait for a more perfect opportunity to come when I will use him as a scapegoat. The hesitation in Rashidi's voice showed that he didn't necessarily agree with the President, but he wouldn't put up a fight about it. Very well, sir. And while we are at it, I will organize a round-the-clock surveillance on him that will help us discover if he is working for any foreign agency or if there is any other ulterior motive. All right, do that, and keep me in the loop when there's any new developments. We need any leverage that we can get over him, and we need it fast." Just then, the president's gaze moved to one of the 42 inches plasma television that was hung on the wall of his office to see the current leader of the Boko Haram, el-Badawi, appearing on national TV to address Nigeria and any other foreigner who cared to listen about the events that took place last night. As his eyes remained pinned on the television, he wondered if he should inform bin Khalid of the recent developments, but finally thought better of it. He didn't need any cleric to tell him what to do. This would be solely under his control. President Mustafa almost forgot that he was still on call with the Chief of Army Staff, but his attention was drawn back, however briefly, to the ongoing call. "I have to go now," the president said to the caller on the other side of the phone. "El-Badawi is about to speak on television. Make sure you turn on your TV and watch it," the president said, and with that, the call was disconnected. He picked up the remote control to the television that was showing the recorded video from the jihadist and cranked up the volume so that he could listen to the speech. El-Badawi started with the Islamic standard of salutation in Arabic, the holy language of the Prophet Muhammad. Then he switched to Hausa language, but as he spoke, there was a subtitle that was displayed on the screen in English. "I bring great greetings to every faithful Muslim all over the world." El-Badawi cried with no small measure of excitement. Behind him on the screen were several men who stood with sophisticated AK-47s, their faces shrouded in black hoodies, but El-Badawi's face was exposed. "Rejoice, all faithful servants of Allah, because today is a great day that Allah has bestowed upon us His favor, kindness, and graciousness." At this, President Mustafa applauded ecstatically. "Allahu Akbar," he shouted, laughing. Chibok, Borno State, Nigeria. "Oh, here they come again, about to brag like they were the devil themselves," Captain Hassan said to himself. His attention was glued to the television as he saw the leader of the Boko Haram giving his speech. "Well, anyone who does not believe that the devil exists will definitely do so after listening to people like these," El-Badawi continued his remark. "Allah has given another victory to the Boko Haram as we have successfully decimated one of the centers that the infidels introduced to lure away those that were supposed to be faithful to Allah by teaching them the perverted ways of the West." "Yep, definitely convincing. This is the devil speaking," Hassan quipped. "Children who are supposed to be learning the ways of Allah as taught by the Prophet, PBUH, are being corrupted, and the seeds of promiscuity are sown in their hearts, and it is breeding unbelief within a region that is an Islamic caliphate. Well, no more will we let the enemies of Allah prosper." The terrorist smacked his chest hard several times as he proclaimed the next sentence. "I, Abdullah El-Badawi, and every member and sympathizer of the Boko Haram will wage war against the Christians, Jews, the so-called pagans or traditional worshippers, atheists and agnostics, Shiite, every hypocrite Sunni Muslim until 18 they convert and leave the corrupting ways of the West and embrace Sharia, or they will be completely wiped out of the land. And those who think to stop us by fighting us should know now that they cannot stop one who fights for the Almighty. Injuries do not deter us. Martyrdom does not hurt our heart, because it is the shortest path to the bliss of paradise, and we all faithfully look forward to it. We win by merely being at war, because God's army knows no defeat. Tusk, is that why you have to put up such a spectacle?" Hassan replied to the terrorist on television. "The leaders of Nigeria have never been able to stop our campaigns, and every form of tactic they have come up with have failed," because of the grace of Allah, and we do not fear them at all. Let me inform everyone who cares to listen, from the president to the least person, that it is just a matter of time before this nation called Nigeria would be decimated, destroyed, annihilated, pulverized, and in its stead will be an Islamic caliphate completely governed by Sharia law. El-Badawi leaned forward as though he was trying to whisper a great secret to an invincible person sitting adjacent to him. What you have just experienced is but a tip of the iceberg, a child's play compared to what we will do in this country. I want you all to note this down in the deep recesses of your heart, that Boko Haram is here to stay. Peace be upon every member of Jama'atu al-Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad. El-Badawi waved out his hands like a cleric or monarch who was declaring blessings over his subjects. Rejoice, because we have seen the beneficence of Allah and will continue to. He concluded his speech, then his face disappeared from the screen as the abducted girls were paraded in front of the camera for the whole world to see. When the last of the shivering girls, whose faces were contorted into horror, finished walking in front of the camera that was mounted on a tripod, the recorded video was cut off. Hassan helplessly watched in horror and regretted not acting faster for the umpteenth time that morning. Still in his state of helpless devastation, he looked back on all his years with the Nigerian army and was filled with shame and guilt for every part that he might have knowingly or unknowingly played to abet these terrorist groups. ASO Villa, Abuja, Nigeria. President Mustafa was ecstatic about El-Badawi's speech. At different intervals, he found himself clapping and even cheering the Boko Haram leader after every punchline. El-Badawi was correct, he told himself. This was indeed just the beginning. Nigerian Defense Headquarters, Abuja, Nigeria. Unlike President Mustafa and Captain Hassan, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Jamal Rashidi did not express any emotion when the speech was going on. He sat down stoically on his office leather chair, never twitching or blinking even once. Rashid was an avid poker player, and his current poker face testified as much. With his unreadable expression, anybody could tell what President Mustafa and Captain Hassan was feeling when the speech from the terrorist was being rendered, but not Rashidi. But one thing is sure, and that is the fact that whatever emotions these three men were displaying mirrored the swirling emotions coursing through the hearts and body of a lot of Nigerians, friends and foe alike, enemies and allies. Congratulations, Mr. Azubuike Enioma, your wife has successfully given birth to a beautiful bouncing baby girl. The 5-year-old Osita Enioma heard his daddy's friend and family doctor cheerfully announcing this to his dad. Osita had often heard his daddy referring to the doctor with the name Tobe. Osita liked the doctor because each time he came to the house, he always brought gifts. But Osita did not like coming to the doctor's hospital anytime he was sick, because the doctor used to give him that painful injection and plenty of bitter medicine. The reaction his daddy was currently displaying showed that he was excited about the news that was delivered to him. Osita didn't understand what the doctor meant by his news, but all he knew was that it was something that made his father very joyful, because at that moment, Daddy started jumping for joy as several congratulations began flying through the air. His daddy was also his best friend, and so, seeing Daddy happy also made him happy as well. He looked around to see nurses who were in hospital scrubs and other people who were dressed normally, milling around the waiting area. All of them were smiling, and some were laughing at his daddy's display of joy. Osita decided not to be left out. Then he started mimicking his daddy's shouts of excitement. God, you are good, ooh. God, you are good, oh, 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 oh. The way he shouted made everyone around them turn towards him, and they resumed another fresh round of laughter, and this time around, even those who had been smiling joined in. He didn't know why they were happy with his display, but all he knew was it gave him joy to make them happy, and so he wanted to do more. But before he could take his fans on another round, the excitement began to taper down. And what is all this, mister, you are calling me? Are we not friends anymore? Osita heard his daddy asking the man who had delivered the good news. Of course, we are best friends for life. I know you've been itching to hear those words for long, so I said I should present it to you just the way I will say to any of my clients that deserve such salutations. You are correct. It's been so long since I've been waiting to hear it indeed. Especially after the last 2 miscarriages, we were really afraid that this one wasn't going to pull through. You see why I had to present the news to you the way I did, huh? Don't worry, you and I will still meet outside the hospital to celebrate with a few bottles of cold beer. Then it was as if Dr. Tobe finally noticed Osita because he spun around, crouched until he was eye level with him, and playfully tapped him on his cheek as he started talking. Congratulations, you now have a beautiful baby sister. I bet you have also been itching to hear that for a long time, right? The little boy just smiled shyly because of the sudden attention he was getting. 21, Orwa, I can see your excitement from that big smile on your face. Then Osita watched as his daddy's friend put his right hand in one of his trouser side pockets and brought out a brown envelope and gave it to him. This is my little gift to congratulate you for having a new baby sister. His gaze moved to his father, who was smiling at him as though seeking his permission, and returned to the brown envelope his daddy's friend was holding. Finally stretched out his hands and collected the brown envelope which his parents would later tell him contained money, precisely 10,000 naira. That's my good boy. His daddy's friend patted him lightly on the head before he straightened from his crouched posture and returned his attention to his daddy. So I guess it's time to go settle the bill, his daddy asked. Oh yes, it's time indeed, Daddy's friend replied, the beaming smile never leaving his face. But not so soon. What do you mean? I'm saying that you should go and see your wife and newborn baby first, and after that, you and I shall be splitting the bills. What bills? The hospital bills, of course. Do you have another? No way, you can't do that, Daddy cried, gasping. Yes way I can, Daddy's best friend and doctor grinned. But you're my doctor, and I came to you as such, and this is a hospital, your hospital, and not a charity organization. Yeah. But you seem to have forgotten that I am not just your doctor, but I am your best friend. Erica and I have been seriously praying for you since we knew how much you have been struggling medically. God has finally answered our prayers, and I love your baby girl like she was mine. Now I have finished doing the duty of a doctor, allowing me to also carry out the duty of a best friend and a brother who is from another mother. I have informed Erica of your wife's safe delivery. She squealed in excitement. I'm sure she is currently on her way as we speak with a truckload of amazing gifts. But you have played a huge friendly role by safely birthing my child and giving that brown envelope to my son. I don't even know what is inside it, but I know that whatever it is, it won't be what I would take for granted. He is also like a son to me, so what I just did was a father-son celebration. The doctor began to push Osita and his daddy towards the direction his mother had earlier been taken when they arrived at the hospital a couple of hours ago. Oya, go and see your wife and that beautiful doll of yours. His daddy thanked the doctor again. Osita mimicked his daddy, and they both began to walk towards the direction of his mother and new sister doll when the doctor called out to them and hurried to catch up. While you are at it, let me go and start preparing the birth certificate. So I'd like to ask if you and your wife have decided on the name to christen your child, or would you like to discuss it with her now? No, we had already decided even before she got pregnant. Achechi is a unisex name, so we decided that whether we give birth to a boy or girl, we would name the child Achechi. What a beautiful name. And with a beautiful girl like that, God truly has a mind of his own. You can say that again, his daddy laughed. Now be gone with you, let me go and see my wife and my beautiful doll. His daddy replied to the doctor, held Osita by the hand, and began to walk away. 22. The first thing he did, when he entered the place where his mother and his little sister were, was to confirm with his eyes if his mother had truly given birth to a doll, as his daddy's best friend was saying. He went closer to where the tiny bundle was, and confirmed that his sister was truly a doll. She was a pink doll, or maybe brown. He wasn't exactly sure, but he was sure of one thing, and that was the fact that he wanted to play with her now. And that was what he told his parents, who didn't notice that he was there with them as they kept embracing each other with tears of joy. Osita observed the look on their faces as he sought their permission. It resembled the expression they gave him when they disapproved of something he did. Instead of grasping the hint, he remained perplexed by their reactions. Weren't dolls meant for playing? So, why were his parents refusing him the chance to play with the beautiful pink baby doll who was going to be his sister? You can't play with her, his daddy finally said. But is she not a doll? Why can't I play with her? Osita inquired. His mother smiled as she drew him closer and held him affectionately. That, my dear, is because she is not ready to be played with. And that was how the matter was put to rest. Mahmoud Ali knelt down on his prayer mat as he bowed towards Mecca and prayed. The prayer he was currently offering had been the one he had been praying since the age of 7. Now he is 19 years old and a 200-level student of home economics in Shehu Shagari College of Education, Sokoto State, Nigeria. The interior of the modest-sized mosque was designed with geometric patterns. The walls were painted in warm, earthy tones. A mihrab, intricately designed, stood as the focal point, indicating the Qibla, the direction of Mecca. Narrow windows were strategically created around the walls for ventilation and soft light during the day. The prayer mat-covered floor was a tapestry of muted colors. Around the periphery, shelves held copies of the Quran and other religious texts. All around him were his fellow lower-ranked, radical jihadists that desired to be noticed by El-Badawi and all the top guns at the highest level of Boko Haram, kneeling down, bowing towards Mecca as they performed the Fajr in Arabic, the language of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. All dressed in a loose-fitting, ankle-length jalamia, paired with a kufi. There were over 28 of them in the mosque, and they were all men. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Mahmud affirmed the next sentence in his prayers with vigor. There is no God but Allah. I declare that Allah is one and Muhammad is his faithful slave and prophet. O Allah, I declare that you are the only true God and that you have given Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, your true word which is written in the Holy Quran via Angel Jibril to guide us. As Mahmud kept praying, he continued to draw strength from the words that were coming out of his mouth, and he kept feeling more excited. Yes, Allah, grant me grace to do your will, and give me the strength to fight against Satan, the accursed, and his evil works. The Holy Quran tells us in Surah 4:52, Jews and Christians are the ones whom God has cursed, and he whom God excludes from his mercy, you shall never find one to help and save him. Make me strong, and let my hands be the sword that you would use to destroy all infidels in this country and all over the world. This is my fervent desire, because I know it is your will. As Mahmoud prayed, faster and faster, the words came tumbling, accompanied with more surah. The Holy Quran in Surah 5:51 says, "O you who believe, take not the Jews and the Christians as awliya, friends, protectors, helpers, etc. They are but awliya to one another. And if any amongst you takes them as awliya, then surely he is one of them. Verily, Allah guides not those people who are the zalimun, polytheists and wrongdoers and unjust. I pray that you will rain down quick judgment and death to all the apostate Muslims in this country and all over the world, and let them go down to hell, which they are already condemned to. Help us and every jihadist group all over the world that is trying to overthrow all the apostate and infidel governments in their different countries to establish an Islamic caliphate that would be totally governed by Sharia law." 24 Then, Mahmoud began listing out several terrorist groups and praying specially for each of them and their needs. Help my brethren who are faithfully carrying out jihad in Jama'atu al-As-Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad Boko Haram with all the resources that they need, both human and deadly weapons, to finally undo the abominations that the British has done. Help them to overthrow the evil, blasphemous, nefarious structure of governance that they have dumped on us, destroy every form of westernization, and convert it to a pure Islamic government that would be guided by Sharia law. Help my brothers who are in Hezbollah and Hamas to fulfill their highest hope and desires of driving all those apes and pigs calling themselves Israel from Palestine. Let all the Zionists be driven into the Caspian Sea. Help the Muslim Brotherhood to achieve their goals of toppling all the apostate regimes in the Middle East and North Africa, especially the dogs that are currently at the helm of affairs in Egypt and all the traitors in the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis that have gone to bed with the West to enrich their pockets. They are a disgrace to Islam. Punish them, Allah. And so Mahmoud continued, taking out his precious time to call as many groups as he could remember and pray specially for them. And finally, I ask that you help all the mullahs and ayatollahs in Iran, especially the supreme leader, to acquire and fulfill his desire of finally having nuclear weapons attached with the most destructive warheads that he would use to annihilate, extinguish, vaporize the small Satan Israel and the big Satan the United States of America from the world map. Regardless of our differences, at least, we agree on this one thing: annihilation of the dirty Jews and America. Bless everyone who has become shaheed, martyr for Islam. Indeed, my desire is to be like them when my time comes. Mahmoud finished praying, got up from his prayer mat and stepped out with a huge smile on his face, believing that Allah would indeed grant him his wish. It was just a matter of time, and he would patiently wait for it. And when it came, he would be as brave as Osama bin Laden, Sheikh Saddam Hussein, Ayatollah Khomeini, and every other of his heroes that had passed. "Home, sweet home," David King exclaimed excitedly as his foot touched the tarmac after his flight from Lagos landed at the Port Harcourt International Airport. Feeling jet lag from a long direct flight from the United States of America to Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos, he had now completed the final leg of his journey home from the economic capital of the country to the South-South region. Well, his patience had finally paid off, he told himself, and he began making his way to the baggage claim area. Talking about home, this was not his only home though, but at least Nigeria was his first home. Born to Nigerian parents and bred in the United States of America, the 6'2" 21-year-old microengineering student at Florida State University, Tallahassee, and the linebacker of the university's basketball team was actually a citizen of these two countries with full citizen rights. David's parents. Israel and Nicole King, both first-generation children of Nigerian immigrants, had met each other and gotten married in the United States of America. David had been told several times about the story surrounding his birth, that he could narrate it even in his dreams. His mother, who apparently couldn't get enough after her first pilgrimage to Israel, wanted to go again, despite the depression that was caused by her health challenge that prevented her from getting pregnant when she and her husband wanted to start having kids. There was something special about those sites in Jerusalem and all those biblical places in Israel. She'd insisted after her husband and family persuaded her to at least wait until the time was right, after she had finished her sessions with the family's gynecologist. She wanted to go to Israel, and she wanted to go right then. It didn't matter that her medical sessions would improve her chances of getting what she wanted the most in the world. An inexplicable desire to travel to Israel when I was almost due with my program with our gynecologist welled up in me, Nicole had recounted to David in her tales. I couldn't explain it, but I was sure of one thing. It was the fact that I needed to be in Israel. Thus, with her relentless pressure on her family, they finally gave their blessings as she and her husband began making their way to Jerusalem. While on their way to Ben Gurion Airport, Nicole had remarked to her husband at different intervals that she was so excited that they were going to see the country that he was named after. Each time I said those words to him, it drew out the kind of shy smile of a high school student going on his first date from your father. She would always say to David, as she giggled like a high school student who was trying to regale her girlfriends about her date with her first crush. The thought made him smile, although it was tight-lipped and almost imperceptible, lest people think he was crazy. 26, loving the feeling she got after visiting every biblical site that she could go to, she always took a return trip. This wasn't a result of dopamine, it was something higher and serene, glorious even. A lot of people called it the Jerusalem syndrome. Nicole became pregnant during that particular pilgrimage to Israel. 9 months later, her child labor started on one of her visits to her parents' house. She had been rushed to the nearest hospital where she had remarkably handled her first pregnancy like an experienced pro. She didn't experience much labor pain. She had given birth like the Hebrew women in the Bible. I told your father that we will call you David after a revelation I had about you the previous night. He looked at me pointedly as if to say, these Jerusalem syndromes are really hitting you hard, you need to get a grip. Nicole had replied when David asked what his father's response was. But after her unwavering stance, she had told David, her husband finally backed down and agreed that David would be his name, but on one condition. She would never mention the revelation to him until he was at least 18 years or above. This would avoid them influencing his career in life, he'd argued, insisting that if the vision was real, it would come to pass regardless of whether they told him or not. Nicole vehemently disagreed with her husband's sentiments, but finally acquiesced, however reluctantly, after her husband, Israel, put his foot on the ground. And that was how such matters were put to rest until 3 years ago, during his 18th birthday, when his parents decided that it was time for him to know. After pondering over it multiple times, even today, David still didn't know what to make of his mother's dream or vision. He wasn't really religious, he was an agnostic. His mother was religious, a devout Catholic to be precise. His father was teetering on the precipices of religion and agnosticism. Although it wasn't his intention, his mother had seen the questioning expression on his face, mixed with a hint of doubt. And knowing his mother very well, he knew that at that point, Nicole must be mentally chiding herself for agreeing with her husband. And even though David still hasn't decided if he believed his mother's fictitious dream or vision, he wouldn't deny the fact that it was becoming one of the foremost thoughts in his heart in recent times. And not surprisingly, he caught himself going down that train of thought as he stepped away from the tarmac and widened the distance between him and the airplane. And just as he had always done when such thoughts came to mind, he shoved the thought to the back recesses of his heart. He wheeled his gaze forward and saw the most beautiful woman in the world just outside the airport terminal, holding up a placard that had his name boldly written on it. She also saw him the same time he did her. Then they began running towards each other. As they got within a few inches of each other, David dropped his luggage which he had been rolling, and the woman dropped her placard as she embraced him with all her motherly love. David returned his mother's gesture, engulfing her small frame in his arms. "Here comes the most beautiful woman in the world," David exclaimed, lifting his mother's petite frame from the ground, turning her around, and drawing the eyes of the people around the airport toward them with such an uncommon display that wasn't abnormal. Embarrassed at such a spectacle making a public scene, his mother protested for him to drop her back to the ground, but David didn't relent until he was satisfied. "Oh dear, don't you know that I'm not a little child? Why did you have to spin me around like that?" she flushed, playfully slapping him on his back. "I didn't spin you around because you were a child. I did it because you were special to me, and that's what you do for a special one." 27 Nicole was thrilled. David was her first and only child, but he gave her the joy of 10 children. It goes without saying that he wasn't perfect, but she wasn't complaining. On the contrary, she was happy and grateful. "Why didn't you send one of the drivers to come and pick me instead of going through all the stress?" David asked after his mother insisted on carrying one of his luggages as they made their way to where a 2019 model of a black limousine was parked, with a driver wearing sunglasses standing beside it. "That's because I missed you and I couldn't wait to see you. But don't worry, I'm not driving. The driver brought me here," she said, now panting from the exhaustion of carrying one of her son's loads. Still, she wouldn't relinquish it to David even when he requested, saying that she needed the exercise. David just shook his head and smiled at his sweaty mother. As David and his mother stepped outside the terminal of the international airport, a scene of organized chaos unfolds. The bustling activity of passengers, airport staff, and taxis created a dynamic atmosphere. The air was filled with a symphony of sounds, the chatter of travelers, the hum of engines, and the occasional announcements over the public address system. The exterior of the terminal, with its modern architectural design, stood as a gateway to the city. The sprawling parking lot accommodated a fleet of vehicles, from taxi to private cars, in constant motion. The tropical climate of Port Harcourt made its presence known through the warmth in the air and the occasional breeze that carried a hint of humidity. Large signage, displaying the airport's name and relevant information, welcomed visitors and guided them through the outdoor spaces. Uniformed airport personnel moved purposefully, ensuring the smooth flow of traffic and assisting passengers with their belongings. The landscape surrounding the airport was lush and green, with palm trees swaying in the breeze. Nicole and David finally arrived at the car where the lanky driver was dutifully waiting for his employers. Upon seeing them, the driver snatched up David's luggages and stowed them in the trunk of his car as he encouraged mother and son to make themselves comfortable at the rear seats. After his employers and their luggages were secured in the confines of their limousine, only then did he climb the driver's seat, crank up the car engine, and zoomed off into the busy city of Port Harcourt. "You remember that it's your turn to come to my house?" Deborah Zira asked her best friend Farida over the phone. This question arose a couple of minutes into the conversation when Deborah felt it was time to shift to another topic. Her friend on the other end let out a long and frustrating groan, making Deborah burst into laughter. She was clearly relishing the discomfort her question was causing her best friend. Deborah wouldn't show mercy. It was time for Farida to experience her own dose of misery, and Deborah was determined to see it through. "Oh, Deborah, so you're laughing at my misery, huh? Just wait until I catch you." Deborah's laughter echoed. "Isn't that what friends do for each other? Laugh at each other in times of misery?" Before Farida could respond, Deborah continued, "And oh, you don't have to thank me, honey. You're welcome. Just remember, you can always count on me." Imagining the funny, horrified expression on her friend's face, Deborah was intoxicated with more laughter. "I think I need to get a new friend. It's over between you and me," Farida shouted almost hysterically, followed by another frustrating groan that sounded like she was going through birth pangs. "You want to roll over and die? You can groan all you want. Just don't expect me to look for you tomorrow in my house, Farida." As Deborah spoke, she could imagine the funny, horrifying expression on her friend's face. It left her drunk with more laughter. "I think I'll see you in court instead," Farida replied, not without another groan. "You're such a silly girl. You'll never give birth to those children you want with all these groans." Deborah retorted with another high-pitched laughter, reciprocated by Farida in a way that sounded almost painful. Both friends exchanged laughs and groans, as if performing for an imaginary overexcited crowd. Having met during their second year in basic school, the two friends had been inseparable. Currently studying home economics at Shehushagari College of Education in Sokoto, they faithfully visited each other's houses during holidays, a tradition their families anticipated eagerly. However, there was a glitch in this perfect union. Farida was Muslim, and Deborah was Christian. Born and bred in Christian and Muslim families respectively, this little but significant fact never succeeded in separating the two friends, as it had done with some Nigerians. The problem in their relationship was just that each time either of the two friends visited the other, the host family always wanted to convert the visitor. Anticipating such events, the two friends always planned accordingly. They had decided and agreed that whenever the host family would start preaching to convert the other guest, they'd humor them, pretending to listen attentively, while the end result was that they would be unshaken in their beliefs. With this, it was a win-win for everyone. But somewhere deep down in their hearts, and even in their place of prayers, both friends prayed and hoped for the day they would be of one religion. What kind of friends would they be if they didn't look out for the well-being of the other? The question now was who was right, and who would finally convert and join the other. 29. I just don't want to hear another "Jesus is Lord" or "Jesus is the true Son of God" or "Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light," Farida scoffed. "I don't care, it's your turn. You must come, or else I will make my way as far as your bedroom myself and drag your sorry butt to my house." Farida released another round of groaning that was reciprocated with another high-pitched laughter before the conversation was switched to another direction. "So how is Ibrahim?" asked Deborah. Deborah could not see Farida, but from the tone of her voice, Deborah could tell that this was a pleasant point of discussion for her friend. "We are doing fine. He took me out yesterday, and we discussed the possibility of marriage." Deborah exclaimed gleefully. So excited for you, girl. You must tell me everything when you come over, you must. Ah, why are you so excited? He hasn't given me an engagement ring. We both know that this is as serious as it can get. I don't care what you say or think. You must tell me all the juicy details when you come over. All right, before you bite my head off. Farida was suddenly eager to shift the spotlight from herself. What about that crazy guy Mahmoud? Is he still disturbing you? She asked out of the blues, smoothly altering the trajectory of the conversation to another topic. The change of topic made Deborah frown with a very troubled face. Thank God her friend was not here to see her. If not, she would probe deeper, and Deborah would have no choice than to tell her the whole thing. She exhaled in relief and began to give a reply. He doesn't want to take no for an answer. It's almost like he's trying to force me into going out with him. This little information was only a tip of the iceberg, but Farida's angry tone made her feel like she had done the right thing by not divulging the whole ordeal. He is an idiot. He cannot pressure you into doing what you don't want, Farida shouted. Do you want me or Ibro to talk some sense into that raving skull of his? No, I don't want you to do that. It will look as if I am noticing his antics, and it would look like I am being affected by it, which is definitely the desired effect that I'm sure he would like to see. So maybe if I just act oblivious to the whole thing, he would just get tired and back off. There was a moment of brief hesitation, and Deborah knew that her friend was seriously mulling over what she just said. After almost a minute of silence, Farida's voice came back clear on the airwaves, capitulating to her friend's words, but not without some admonishment. All right, but do not hesitate to call me whenever you need me. I'll remember that. Thank you, Deborah said sincerely. The two friends talked for a while longer before the call finally came to an end. Deborah had barely dropped the call when a pair of hands grabbed her waist from behind. She jumped, realizing too late that the hands holding her in a vice-like grip were those of her mischievous 9-year-old brother and the family's last born, confirming her earlier suspicion. Samuel Ayuba Zira, she shouted. Please drive faster. Can't you drive any faster than this? Nicole King said with a grave urgency in her voice. Sitting on the edge of her car seat at the owner's corner, she looked as though with her willpower alone, she could make the car fly supernaturally. I'm trying, ma'am, the driver replied, as he threw her a brief look of apology over his shoulders. I can do better than this, but I'm just trying to avoid collisions and this traffic. He finished with another look of apology as he maneuvered past several other cars, but not without getting some insults and curses from the impatient drivers. 6 minutes later, and after doing different maneuvers, the traffic was finally cleared. The driver gunned his engine and increased from 70 miles per hour to 110 miles. At last, they got to their destination, but Nicole was almost 10 minutes late for the first time to the meeting that she was always punctual to. As soon as the driver parked the 2019 black Range Rover, without waiting for the driver to kill the engine, Nicole immediately pushed the car door open and rushed out, not even bothering to heed her driver's warning that she should move carefully and ladylike. The driver, Chika N. Nadozi was his name, forgot about tending to the car for a while and watched with rapt attention as his employer ran past several flower plants and leaped over little barrier as she tried to cut corners to reduce the time it would have taken her to get to the entrance door if she had used the direct route. At the moment, she was carrying those types of big handbags that looked as though it was twice her size. She looked like the perfect definition of what Nigerians called small girl, big God, Yet she was running as though she was being propelled forward by a gust of wind. She might as well be floating on air. Chica shook his head with a smile and returned his attention to his task. Upon recognizing her as a familiar face, the doorman opened the door with a smile and a quick bow. Greeting the doorman with only a wave of her hand and a tight-lipped smile, Nicole hurried forward, her high-heeled shoes announcing her arrival with a loud clack-clack with every step she took on the sparkling tiled floor. The other attendees were all present and comfortably seated on the leather-strapped seats that had been placed around a long rectangular table for today's meeting. Nicole was the last to arrive at the venue that had been designated for this meeting. "I'm so sorry I came late. My son just returned from the United States, and I had to accompany the driver to pick him up from the airport. I have missed that boy so much," Nicole said hurriedly as she comfortably sat on the seat that was reserved for her at the long rectangular table, panting from the exhaustion of running. The woman gave her a smile and a knowing nod. This was a gathering of the elite women of high society, and everyone in attendance was dressed as such. They adorned graceful evening gowns that flowed with a symphony of vibrant colors and intricate patterns. Their ears sparkled with delicate yet statement earrings, exquisite earrings that showcased the craftsmanship of intricate gold filigree and vibrant gemstones. Some opted for dangling chandelier earrings, while others preferred the understated elegance of pearl or coral studs. On 31 some of their wrists, their bracelets were intricately beaded designs intermingled with finely crafted gold or silver bangles, creating a symphony of textures and colors, while others embraced the simplicity of a well-chosen designer wristwatch. They completed their outfits with elegant handbags that complemented their ensembles and embellished their necklines with tasteful necklaces. My, is that why you had to run? I'm sure we would have all understood your reasons for coming late, dear. Sit down and don't talk for a while, you are perspiring. Let the air conditioner cool you a bit. The current host for this meeting, Mrs. Angela Adami, said from across the table where she sat, motioning with her eyes for Nicole to drink from the cold bottle of water in front of her, as she simultaneously asked one of the servers to get Nicole a cup of iced tea. Nicole graciously accepted the offer as she poured herself a tall glass from the bottle, which contained the cold water. All the ladies in this little club hall had come together to form an association when they realized that they had a lot in common. First, these women all belonged to an elite society, all in their middle ages and happily married to their dream husbands. These women were the wives of politicians, business tycoons, oil well owners, and the CEOs of high-ranking multinational companies. Another thing they also had in common was their husbands didn't let them work in their companies in spite of their persistent pleas. Their women should be content with traveling anywhere they wanted in the world with their private jets, feel free to buy any designer clothes, shoes, and handbags they wanted, organize endless tea or dinner parties, showing off their latest treasures, and just enjoy the many wealth at their disposal, while the men would continue to be hard at work to keep the cash flow. To top it off, no one would employ the women in the country to come work for their enterprises because of their husband's image, regardless of their great qualifications. The women were just too qualified to work for anyone, that was it. It was for these reasons plus a few more, coupled with the determination not to remain as housewives, that they founded their enterprises. With dedication and diligence, in no time, the success of these enterprises skyrocketed. The women built their companies from the scratch with fewer than 20 employees, but now had employees in their hundreds and in their thousands, much to the chagrin of their husbands who thought their trophy wives were only good for eating their acquired wealth and following them to business and political parties. The end result was now that their husbands' money combined with their own, they had more money than they could ever imagine, and the problem was how to spend it. After several deliberations on Christ's commandment to his faithful followers, the women came to the conclusion that their wealth must have been entrusted into their hands for a purpose. And that was why and how the association, Christ Sisters Club, was formed. The name of the club was not for the purpose of sounding pious, but these were the women who understood that God had called anyone who believed in Jesus Christ his sons and daughters. So they decided to earnestly take their place as Christ sisters. Thus, the association had been formed to reach out first and foremost to Christ, their love, and finally, their finances to the less privileged. It didn't always happen in this sequence, but the women knew it within themselves that this was their intention. The women had been doing just that for more than 5 years, but today, a new agenda was on the table. "So how is your son?" Mrs. Elizabeth Johnson, the only senator's wife in the group, asked. 32 Nicole looked up at the smiling face of the senator's wife. She knew that Elizabeth had good intentions, but there was also an ulterior motive attached to her careful and kind inquiries. "He is as handsome as ever," she replied with a smile of her own, expecting the response that was sure to come from Mrs. Johnson. This conversation has happened several times. By now, it was like a movie script, and everyone was expected to flawlessly say their part. "I know, right?" The senator's wife chortled in a way that made her plump cheek more apparent. "I shall inform my daughter Jessica that David is back." Elizabeth Johnson liked the way she mentioned the 2 names in one sentence, and she liked the way the 2 names sounded in her ears, so perfect. She could almost see the 2 names standing on the... She stopped her train of thought from moving further. "You know, both of them have been good friends." Elizabeth added quickly, but everyone at the table knew that Jessica had a huge crush on David, and Elizabeth had encouraged her daughter's feelings because she had come to acknowledge that David was a good, handsome, and focused young man with a prospective future. Nicole winked at her friend. "Please do, and sure, you can tell her to drop by when she's less busy to say hi." All the women who also wanted David King for their daughters eagerly engaged in the conversation. The medium-sized club hall became very animated as these women tried to stake a claim for their daughters who had a crush on one good guy, David. Seriously not wanting the women to deviate from the main purpose for which they had gathered, Nicole discreetly steered the conversation to the main agenda of the meeting. "Welcome back to Earth," Nicole muttered under her breath when she knew she had succeeded in her purpose. She carefully observed the expressions on the faces of the women around her. They looked like they had just come from the moon or planet Mars. "How dare you say my name in such an uncivilized manner, eh?" Deborah's little brother, Samuel, chided in consternation, chest puffed out, eyes wide, his whole body quivering. "So barbaric, hideous, asinine, asinine." That was his most recent addition to his vocabulary. The word sounded nice in his ears with the way it rolled off his tongue, but there was no time for self-congratulations. "Samuel Ayuba Zira," Deborah shouted again. "Deborah Hadaza Zira," her brother shouted back. Although Deborah was his older sister, why couldn't she accord him the respect that he deserved as a man? What was so difficult about that? Well, he didn't blame her, at least not completely. It was the fault of his parents for giving birth to 4 girls before him, a male child as the last born. He should have been the first child. Deborah should have come after him. Having gotten used to taking care of female children, his parents were also treating him like they would a girl child, even though he'd been their anticipated miracle boy child. How annoying. This was very annoying. To even buttress his point, He was currently wearing a pink t-shirt that had a flowery design on jean trousers. Most of his clothes had a touch of pink and looked feminine. Well, he would show them. He'd show them all what it meant to be a man, and he would ensure that they treat him as such. As the only male child of the family, his parents never encouraged him to play most times with other boys his age. Whenever he insisted on playing with his peers, his parents would be forced to acquiesce. But Samuel would always hear something like, "Be careful and make sure you don't injure yourself." Injure himself? Surely that instruction must be the biggest joke of the century. How could he not injure himself when it was the norm among his peers? If he didn't injure himself by climbing trees, rocks, high walls, and constantly risking his life, which bodily injury marks would he carry as a souvenir from his childhood to adulthood to show his unborn children for the purpose of bragging to them about the kind of rebel that he was in his infancy? He had seen some of his classmates always bragging about their fathers, whom they had come to acknowledge as their heroes because of the injury marks that they had gotten from childhood. His classmates admired their fathers for the exciting stories behind those injury marks. Thus, Samuel decided that no matter what, he was going to be a hero to his unborn children by doing what his fellow boys were doing and getting those crucial injury marks. Don't forget the injury marks. Samuel had reassured himself that before his adulthood, all the stories about his childhood would be super exciting. Anyone that didn't sound exciting enough would have to be embellished. The most important thing was that he must be a hero to his children. End of story. He was going to be that rebel father that would produce rebel children. "How long have you been home from school, Samuel?" Deborah asked, after a few seconds of silence passed between them. Instead of giving an accurate answer to his sister's question, Samuel decided to use the opportunity to show his brilliance. He had been learning some new things. Now was the time to use his newly acquired knowledge to intimidate his sister as usual. 34, I went to my school library today to browse through some books. You know what? Before his sister could ask, "What does that have to do with my question?" Samuel continued. "I discovered a great mystery." "What great mystery is that?" Deborah inquired cautiously. "Did you know that the nickname for America, I mean the United States of America, and not the continents of North and South America?" Samuel spoke with a look that read, "I know that you don't know this, so let me educate you. Anyway, as I was saying, did you know that the United States of America is also known as Uncle Sam?" The expression on Deborah's face showed that she indeed didn't know this, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of admitting to not knowing. Little Samuel responded with his own look that read, "I know that you don't know it, whether you admit it or not. I've made up my mind that from today, I want everybody in this house to start addressing me as Uncle Sam." She watched him in silence for a while as though trying to comprehend the in-depth absurdity of his words. Then she burst out laughing. "Well, everyone should start addressing me as Judge Deborah. There is also a great mystery attached to my name, you know." Deborah spoke with a voice filled with derision. He glared angrily at his sister. With his pride wounded, he concluded that his sister was mean and rude. Sambisa Forest. Was there ever a name that sounded more dangerous in Nigeria? Captain Hassan Lowell wondered to himself. Was there ever a place that sounded more ominous in Nigeria? This was the name that put fear in the hearts of many Nigerian citizens. Sambisa Forest, the battleground of the Nigerian army and Boko Haram, aka the Nigerian Taliban. Sambisa Forest, a place that had ended so many lives, civilian, military, and terrorists alike. Still in a state of deep meditation over the military and the terrorists, Hassan subconsciously cradled a geopolitical thriller that he had been reading prior to his wonderment. The thriller novel was bought and paid for by his wife. It was one of the many gifts that he had received from her. Whenever the time came for Captain Hassan Lowell and his regiment to be sent off to the Sambisa forest to fight against Boko Haram insurgency, mission that usually took months before he returned, his wife, Nefisa, would always send him off with books to keep his mind busy whenever he wasn't working. She had apparently known that her husband was a worry-wart, and she knew how wild his thoughts could take him. Thus, one of the best ways of helping him was to distract him from those demons whispering in his head with books. And it had been working, obviously. Captain Hassan didn't grow up a reader. Back in his basic high school, and even his days in the Nigerian Defense Academy, he had never been one of the students you could refer to as brilliant. He was just average, often earning enough points to get him to the next level. But all that had changed when he married Nefisa, who was a bookworm. In the first decade of their marriage, Nefisa had encouraged him to read books, and more books. That was all she could mostly talk about and sing about. At the time, Hassan thought she was becoming a nuisance to his simple life. Then she started talking about the books she had read. He was captivated with the way she spoke about books, with so much animation and enthusiasm. Soon after, he became intrigued. It resulted in tentatively trying out some of her book recommendations for himself. And today he had discovered his favorite genre, and he was as much a bookworm as his wife. He didn't know what he would do without books, and having known his preference political and military thriller, his wife always prepared his reading list accordingly. Even now, Hassan Lowell could swear by the Quran that even though it was still a couple of months before he would be released, he knew that his wife was already shopping for the next set of books that he would return with in his next mission. What a great wife and a wonderful woman, the captain wondered in amazement. He didn't know what he would have done without his beloved Nefisa. She was a sunshine in his dark world, a very good spice in his otherwise boring and monotonous life. He didn't know what he did to deserve such a good and virtuous woman. Captain Hassan Lowell always thanked Allah for blessing him with a woman as precious as Nefisa. Hassan looked down at the book he was currently holding as he tried to distract himself from the smiling face of his wife that appeared in his mind's eye. His gaze was fixated on the book's title as though he was just seeing it for the first time. He read the title as if he was trying to comprehend how the book got into his hand. 36. The Libyan Diversion. It was a geopolitical and military thriller by Joel C. Rosenberg, who was one of his favorite authors. Before reading this one, he'd recently finished a book by Jack Carr, another favorite author of his. The similarities with both authors was, apart from the fact that they wrote the same genre, they were also Americans. In short, 8 out of Hassan's top 10 favorite authors were Americans. One thing that had drawn him to the books written by these authors from the beginning was their high moral regard and their unflinching sense of duty, patriotism, and dedication to their country. What he mostly appreciated was the willingness of the characters in the books to lay down their life if it ever came to that, to sustain the sovereignty of their nation and to protect its image as the sole world power nation. These books were not just filled with unrealistic fiction or film tricks. This was fiction drawn from facts that portrayed the true lifestyle of these brothers and sisters in arms. It inspired Captain Hassan. Also, having read the biography of these authors, he knew that Jack Carr used to be a sniper like him in the American Navy SEAL. Joel C. Rosenberg had once worked with Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, had developed an amazing relationship with former and current presidents, vice presidents, kings, and crown princes of different countries in the Middle East and other parts of the world. interacted with many other muckamucks in the world of politics. He'd also interacted severally with spy chiefs, directors of intelligence agencies and terrorists. Then there was the United States former Marine who had authored several awesome books, Oliver North, and so many others like him. With the geopolitical and military thriller still in his hands, he couldn't help his curiosity about what his fellow comrades in arms who had been posted to places like the Middle East and North Africa were currently doing. Were any of them currently relaxing and reading novels as he was doing, playing cards and having mundane but interesting discussions just like some of his colleagues were doing right now? Or were they firing RPGs, artillery shells, and mortar rounds at some group of radical jihadists? Were they dislodging the bullets from their AK-47s, riddling the bodies of the terrorists with it? Was an intense firefight underway? As much as he admired what the American government was doing by deploying its military to mostly the Middle East and North Africa, he wished they could also deploy some of them to Nigeria. Nigeria needed to be invaded like Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd argued this with himself and some of his colleagues severally. Boko Haram was also a global terrorist group like Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS. And just like ISIS was no more, Hassan wanted badly to see the annihilation of Boko Haram. Why did it look as though all eyes were on the Middle East and North Africa when there was an equally serious problem brewing on the sub-Saharan side of the African continent? Apart from the terrorism, why had the leaders in the West overlooked what China was doing in the continent of Africa? Yes, China. The sleeping giant had woken up and was now on the move. The thought of the Chinese mission and intention towards Africa often churned something in Hassan's gut, so he decided to switch a trajectory of his thoughts back to the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria and neighboring countries. It was safer and a more comfortable ground for him. What happened? Where and how did Boko Haram originate? Why was the Nigerian army currently in this forest, fighting this group of radical jihadists? 37. More importantly, how had the Nigerian government allowed Boko Haram to grow so big that it had raised its standards to that of a global terrorist group, and was also acknowledged as such by the United Nations, the United States, and the Nigerian government? As these multiple questions swarmed in his heart, the captain began to research his mental archives, where he stored up the knowledge he gained from reading books about the origin and history of Boko Haram. The terrorist group had first started as a group of Islamic northern bikers. The more popular name for bikes or motorcycles in Nigeria is Okada, formerly a brand name for an airline. As time went on, the country's citizens adopted that word for motorcycles in the Nigerian colloquial Pidgin English. Today, many Nigerians did not know about the Okada airline. Even most of those who knew about it had forgotten. In the early 20th century, a small group of Okada men, or Okada riders, had been agitating and protesting the treatment they were getting from the government. What had started as a small group of protesters had morphed into an organization of global terrorists. But Captain Hassan knew that just like there was no smoke without fire, so it was with these Okada riders. Thus he decided to dig deeper into the archives of his brain. And it led him directly to one man. The one man who was the fire that was the reason behind this smoke. The smoke that was now known as Boko Haram. It was none other than a young Nigerian who went by the name Muhammad Ali at the time. Many people might think or believe that the founder of Boko Haram was Mohammed Yusuf, but no. While he was seen as the founder and leader of Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf was just the on-screen guy who had been radicalized by Muhammad Ali. In 1999, a promising teenager named Muhammad Ali lived in northeast Nigeria. His brilliance and maturity made him a natural leader. He was the head of his class in school, and his teachers thought that he had a bright future ahead of him as a medical doctor. Unfortunately, those teachers turned out to be wrong. Ali would go on to establish Boko Haram, one of the most brutal terrorist groups in history. 2 decades after his death in 2004, at the hands of vigilantes, the conflict between Boko Haram and Nigeria's security forces had killed an estimated 40,000 people in northeast Nigeria. The violence had devastated communities, leading to the displacement of over 3 million people, and had plunged millions more into extreme poverty. Today, 2 different factions of Boko Haram continue to target security forces, civil servants, humanitarian workers, and civilians in Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, in their bid to establish their version of a puritanical Islamic state. How in the world did this happen? How did Ali establish Boko Haram, and why? Over the years, there had been so many theories about the mysterious Muhammad Ali, and some of them were contradictory. Many write-ups about the biography of Ali and the history of Boko Haram claimed that Ali was recruited and radicalized by Al-Qaeda before being given a buttload of money to come back to Nigeria and start a radicalized jihadi movement in the northern part of the country. A number of scholars of radical Islamism disagreed with the theory, maintaining that by portraying Boko Haram as a franchise of Al-Qaeda that was set up using a direct grant from Osama bin Laden, the theory downplayed the local agency and motivations that birthed Boko Haram, as well as the group's localized strategies and objectives. Another theory which professors of radical Islamism believed was more accurate and factual revealed that Ali studied and became radicalized in Nigeria by reading extremist literature, some of it from the Middle East. His genius was in taking these ideas and relating them to local issues and grievances. Ali was inspired by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, whom he tried to mimic, but he never had personal contacts with the Taliban or Al-Qaeda members in Nigeria or abroad. However, there had been some unfounded claims about Muhammad Ali's transnational links. In 2014, a report from the International Crisis Group emphasized the importance of Ali's time outside Nigeria to his radicalization. According to this account, Ali studied in Sudan, converted to jihadism there, and then trained and fought in Afghanistan or Algeria before returning to Nigeria to found Boko Haram. Accounts differ and contradict each other about whether he studied and became radicalized in Sudan or Saudi Arabia, and whether he fought in Afghanistan or Algeria. However, this was not supported by strong evidence. Other researchers have referred to a high-level security report that claimed that Ali and his followers were first conscripted to fight in Algeria in the wake of the annulment of the country's 1992 election. However, these authors did not say which intelligence report, by whom, and from where. Instead, they cited an academic report that does not reference such a security report either. An article in Nigeria's Tell magazine reported that it was one Ahmed, not Ali, that had strong links with Saudi Arabia, where he grew up, and that his possible link with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda was being investigated. Another document claimed that it was 2 Algerians that came to Nigeria to recruit members, including Ali, not the other way round, etc., etc., etc. The more Captain Hassan Lowell dug into this matter, the messier reports of Ali's transnational link got. But the most accurate report, which included writings from Boko Haram and interviews from Ali's classmates, indicated that Ali would have been in the last year of his primary school at the same time that he was allegedly in North Africa, which meant that he would have been too young to be given a passport and visa to travel on his own. Truly, Ali was born to Nigerian migrant workers in Saudi Arabia in the late 1970s and returned to his family's home in Maiduguri at the age of 10. He went to the University of Maiduguri Staff Primary School and received top grades in his secondary school final exams at Federal Government College, Maiduguri. According to the reports Captain Hassan Lawal believed was accurate, Ali specialized in the natural sciences. In 1999, he sat for the Nigerian University's joint entrance examination and applied to the University of Maiduguri. It was said that Ali scored the highest marks in Borno State that year and was admitted to study medicine at the University of Maiduguri. However, Ali declined to enroll because he had by this time become involved with radical Islamic circles in Maiduguri. In the eyes of the members of these circles, Western-style schooling was forbidden, which became a major theme for Boko Haram. Ali rejected repeated advice from his classmates and teachers to start his university education and opted instead to self-study and promote an extreme interpretation of Islam. Learning the Quran was not in any way synonymous with radicalization to violent extremism. Otherwise, the majority of the almost 2 billion Muslims in the world, including Captain Lawal, would be violent extremists. Ali lived a normal life in Nigeria after his return until his graduation from high school in 1998, a crucial piece of evidence that Ali did not leave Saudi Arabia a violent extremist. Following the reintroduction of a Sharia system by 12 of the 19 governors in northern Nigeria in 2000, Ali, Yusuf, and their cohorts became disappointed by its poor implementation. They argued that a proper Sharia justice system required the backing of an Islamic state, not secular, democratic institutions. Consequently, they felt the need for a group that would establish an Islamic government in northern Nigeria that would implement Sharia law as the panacea to the region's social problems. Before his death in 2004, Ali had always seen the US invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq as a war on Islam and Muslims globally. Many Muslims across the world viewed the global war on terror as the United States picking on Muslim countries in an attempt to control the world. But Ali and several in his circle took these grievances much further and deeper. They closely followed events in the Middle East and were transfixed by the speeches of Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders. Ali and his follower, Yusuf, incessantly listened to the recordings and read the writings of Bin Laden, Mullah Omar, and Ayman al-Zawahiri that they memorized and cited large portions of these speeches in their own preaching. From there, they read and translated jihadi publications into local Kanuri and Hausa languages. Before recruiting and radicalizing Mohammed Yusuf, having converted to jihadism, Ali and Abu Yuma went on recruitment visits to Salafi clerics in different towns and cities across northern Nigeria in search of a credible leader for their cause. All of their targets, including prominent Salafi clerics in the town of Gom, rejected the invitation, except Yusuf. Consequently, Yusuf publicly rejected Western-style education and secular institutions and advocated for violence in order to replace this system. Ali and Yusuf's readings and views reinforced each other, and they went on to lay the foundations for the group that would become Boko Haram in 2003. Since Yusuf was older and had a higher public profile, it was agreed that he would lead the group and serve as its public face. It was a perfect storm. A multitude of local factors provided a huge market for Boko Haram's ideas. Poverty, illiteracy, and inequality had alienated millions of young people in Nigeria. Political corruption and police brutality had severely damaged the social contract, which had always been fragile. Ethno-religious tensions and violence from the 1980s, unaddressed through the justice system of reconciliation, had led to a huge interfaith mistrust between Muslims and Christians, and sectarian tensions among Muslim groups had sharpened. Ali and his associates exploited all of these factors. They translated Arabic literature from the Middle East and infused this with locally relevant materials to roll out a massive grassroots campaign of radicalization. They spoke to local populations in their own language about the problems bedeviling them. Today, both Ali and Yusuf were dead, killed by local vigilantes and the Nigerian government respectively, and currently replaced by al-Badawi and his father-in-law, who had taken over from the now late Shekau, who had assumed power upon the death of Yusuf in 2009. The account of Muhammad Ali's life and the history of Boko Haram was a testament of a true fact that a great and brilliant mind that was not put to good use could be disastrous for the society. Hassan was still in his brain archives, analyzing Boko Haram when his radio and the radio of all his colleagues around him squawked. "Attention, all men, report immediately to base. I repeat, report immediately to base." Captain Hassan Lawal snapped to combat mode as he and his colleagues, who had just been relaxing, chatting away like some bunch of lazy civilians, made their way to the base. The scout team, Captain Hassan was sure, had returned with their solid intel. It was time for another firefight between the Nigerian army versus Boko Haram. Still in the grand mansion of Anjola Ademi and the current location for the Christ Sisters meeting, the sisters were all gathered in the reception hall. The large, opulent room was adorned with expensive chandeliers and luxurious furnishings, a testament to the wealth and status of the women seated around the table. After exchanging pleasantries and a few words, Anjola, the chair lady of the organization, called the meeting to order. "Amen," the women echoed when the opening prayers were said. Anjola took center stage again. "The agenda for today's meeting is a new proposal from our sister Nicole. In a few minutes she would be taking over from me and telling us what she has in mind. You all know how we do things in this club," she said, looking each of the women in the eye before continuing. "We will listen to her first, before opening the floor for contributions, suggestions, and objections, then the final vote will follow." As the women nodded encouragingly, the chair lady called out to Nicole. "All right, Nicole, you have the stage. Tell us what you have." "Thank you," Nicole King said, rising up from her seat. Her charismatic presence commanded attention, and the women fell silent in anticipation of her words. "Ladies, I'm delighted to see you all today. Our charity has accomplished incredible things in all these years. We have dedicated ourselves to uplifting the underprivileged in the southern parts of Nigeria. We have provided scholarships, built schools, and supported various community projects, and I, for one, am proud to be here among you, doing what we are doing. However, I believe the time has come for us to extend our charity work to a new frontier. It is time to reach out to the northern region of this country." As Nicole made her points, her voice brimmed with palpable determination. There are vast regions in northern Nigeria that still suffer from high poverty rates and illiteracy. It's time we expand our efforts and offer our support to these communities. Indeed, the disparities between the northern and southern regions are staggering. We have witnessed the impact of our charity work here in the south, providing education and healthcare to those in need. By extending our reach, we can make a significant difference in the lives of the less privileged in the north. All around the table, there was a low hum and nods of agreement. I've been studying the statistics, and the numbers are truly alarming. Nicole gestured to a large screen that had been mounted earlier for the purpose of this meeting, displaying statistics and images depicting the stark reality of life in the northern region. The women's eyes followed the slides, their hearts heavy with empathy. Illiteracy rates, malnutrition, and lack of access to basic health care were among the many challenges faced by the people of the North. We have the resources and the influence to bring positive change to these communities. It's our responsibility as privileged women to help those who have been neglected for far too long. She concluded her presentation, and the floor was opened for contributions. Seated around a polished mahogany table, the atmosphere in the room was a blend of determination and thoughtful contemplation. The air crackled with anticipation as each woman prepared to share her insights and concerns. Mrs. Adesua Kinrata, the wife of an influential oil tycoon, took the lead. Her regal poise commanded attention as she addressed the group. Ladies, as Nicole pointed in her presentation, we have accomplished remarkable feats in the South. Our efforts have transformed lives and bestowed hope upon countless individuals. But we cannot turn a blind eye to the suffering in the North. It is our duty to extend our reach and bring about change where it is needed most. Mrs. Amarachio Zoigbo, the wife of an international businessman, leaned forward, her voice infused with genuine concern. We must devise a comprehensive plan to address these issues. Education, healthcare, and economic empowerment should be at the core of our efforts. We need to collaborate with local organizations and leverage our resources to effect lasting change. Nods of agreement rippled through the room as the women recognized the gravity of the task before them. They understood that their collective power and wealth could be harnessed to uplift an entire region, to bring light to the lives shrouded in darkness. However, there were some objections and concerns. Mrs. Elizabeth Johnson, the only senator's wife in the group and the treasurer, spoke up, her voice tinged with concern. But we must also recognize the risks involved. The security situation in the North is volatile. Our safety could be compromised. Is there any way we can do this differently? What do you mean? Nakul asked. I'm only saying if we could have a go-between, that we can provide the funds and resources for them, instead of doing this on our own, as we usually do here in the South. Mrs. Samasala Adesanya nodded in acknowledgement. You raise a valid point, Elizabeth. Safety has to be our utmost priority. The atmosphere that was filled with determination moments ago had just morphed into apprehension. Captain Hassan Lode felt a bead of sweat trickle down his brow as he adjusted his scope, peering through the dense undergrowth of the Sumbasa forest in Bana State. His finger curled delicately around the trigger of his sniper rifle, a Remington 770, anticipation coursing through his veins. His unit had received their marching orders. Just as he predicted, the scout team had returned with a solid intel about another Boko Haram's hideout in the forest. The mission for Captain Hassan and his regiment was simple yet perilous: to neutralize key Boko Haram targets hidden within the heart of this unforgiving labyrinth. Hassan's unit had been meticulously trained for this very moment. Each step they took was a calculated risk, Any misstep could mean walking into a trap set by the terrorists. They moved like phantoms, shadows amid the chaos that plagued this region for far too long. So far, the soldiers had been successfully inching closer and closer to the terrorists' fortress. The element of surprise was still on their side. Clouded in their forest tree camouflage, they blended perfectly with the trees and bushes. The weather was clear, but the sun was scorching. Having mastered how to work under these high, almost unbearable intense solar rays that was the norm in northern Nigeria, the soldiers were not complaining. The mission was very much afoot. Suddenly, the forest erupted in a deafening blast, catching the soldiers who thought that they had been strategic and meticulous off guard. The first blast was followed by a procession of countless others. The dreaded Boko Haram had sensed their presence and retaliated with a barrage of explosive fury. What just happened? How did we give away our advantage? Hassan's heart raced as he dived for cover, seeking solace behind a fallen tree trunk. With the swiftness that was honed through several years of training, the army immediately plunged into a bombardment of retaliatory strikes. Mortar rounds whistled through the air, followed by the booming thunder of artillery shells. The terrorist fighters, who were unfazed with the heavy firepower of the military, replied with their own barrage of RPGs. Grenades erupted like twisted flowers, spewing shrapnel and smoke into the air. The Nigerian army fighters scattered, fighting for their lives as they returned fire. A baptism of fire was taking place on both sides of the preceding war. The thick, acrid smoke filled the battlefield, making it difficult to distinguish friend from foe. The very air seemed to crackle with tension and the eerie symphony of gunfire. Still hiding behind a fallen tree trunk, Hassan could see the overview of the ongoing battle. His colleagues needed some desperate help quickly, or they would start having casualties. These soldiers were skillful, trained fighters. And at the moment, the effectiveness of their training was saving their lives. But not for long, Hassan knew. These men were taking more than they could handle. He took note of his current advantage and began capitalizing on it. The tree trunk had concealed his location, and he could see his colleagues and the terrorists, but none of them could see him. He had a silencer which he couldn't wait to attach to his sniper rifle. Perfectly lining up the terrorists in the scope of his rifle, Hassan was locked and loaded. His fingers pushed the trigger repeatedly with a deadly accuracy that was unrivaled. He could see the results of his efficiency as the terrorists began dropping dead on the forest ground. Hassan's sniper had taken almost 29 terrorists in less than 20 seconds when they realized what was happening. The terrorists were shocked to see their comrades dropping dead from a sniper rifle. Chaos erupted from the side of the Boko Haram as they tried to uncover where the sniper was shooting from. Seeing the confusion in the Boko Haram camp, Hassan decided to change tactics. He unclenched his grip on the rifle and reached for a fragmentation grenade, the edges gnarled from countless conflicts. With a swift, practiced motion, he hurled the explosive into a cluster of Boko Haram fighters, skillfully taking advantage of the chaos. The strike was decisive. The effect was enormous. The deafening detonation momentarily silenced the cacophony of war, sending a shockwave through the undergrowth. Hassan's colleagues stood still for a while, watching in amazement the misfortune that had befallen the terrorists. If anyone was watching them now, he or she would have seen the questioning look on their faces, the wide eyes, their opened mouths. What just happened? They seemed to ask. Did the angels just fight for us? Did God send fire from heaven to consume these guys? Just then, someone was able to break his eyes away from the inferno that had engulfed the terrorists and called out to his colleagues, "Hey, everybody, look over there." The men looked up to the direction he was pointing and saw Captain Hassan standing up from the fallen tree trunk that he had hidden himself, giving them a thumbs up. He had his familiar mischievous smile on his face. Upon realizing what the captain had done, the soldiers began to cheer, congratulating themselves and singing victory songs. Hassan wanted to move over to his friends and join in the celebration when his instinct warned him to remain where he stood. His men were hailing him, chanting his name, still he remained rooted where he was, unable to exactly explain why. Instead, he found himself doing exactly the opposite of what his friends wanted. All his attention was pulling him towards the Baka Haram camp. He didn't know why his gaze kept returning back to the inferno and the billowing smoke. But as the smoke cleared, he saw why. His instincts had, once again, steered him right.